Tower Fantasy is a new MMORPG with an anime aesthetic, following similar design and monetization as Genshin Impact. Because of that, Tower Fantasy has, been deemed the Genshin clone. What's up, everyone? Anubis here with a brand new video for you all today. Hope you all are well. Let's talk about Tower of Fantasy, which is a free-to-play MMORPG developed by Hoda Studios. Hope I pronounced that right. Published by well-known Chinese publishers, Perfect World, as well published by Level Infinite. Also much like Perfect World, very well known and very, obviously. If you watch the Gamescom this past week, I don't know if you guys are going to see this video, but Gamescom was the day before this video was being recorded, and there was a lot of Level Infinite products there. But on people like Perfect World, they're known for publishing games like Remnant from Ashes. They worked on a Star Trek Online game, as well as Neverwinter MMO. Tower Fantasy takes place in a futuristic setting on a planet called Ida. In this setting, there is a radioactive cataclysm that nearly ends civilization. If you play MMO games, you might feel that like the word cataclysm is being used a lot in gaming in period, like even just MMOs. I played a lot of games this year, especially like some turn-based games like Solasta, and cataclysm is a strong word used in a lot of games right now. But anyways, it has to do with this review. You play as the wanderer, exploring the vast world of 5 continents and finding mutated creatures and military forces. And Tower Fantasy, unlike its often compared to counterpart Genshin Impact, which, by the way, I feel like Tower Fantasy is more comparable to another Hoyoverse game, Honkai Impact 3rd, because Honkai Impact and Tower Fantasy are both far futuristic games, as well as they both involve some form of time slowing mechanics, and also they both use fast-paced combat. So people compare Tower Fantasy to Genshin. I feel like the Impact game that the game better compared to is Honkai, but Genshin Impact is the more popular version of the Impact name, so often you see Tower Fantasy compared to Genshin Impact. So in Tower Fantasy, you create your own character, which isn't something that you do in Genshin or Honkai Impact. You don't make your own character. You play as whatever the gacha mechanics are going to give you. But in Tower Fantasy, you create your own character. It's a decent character creator, but it's not great. This isn't something like Black Desert Online where you can just go into so much detail about it. But it is pretty decent character creator. You're seeing my primary character. I do have 2 characters. Like a lot of games developed from Korean, Chinese, and Japanese studios, making a black male character isn't really a thing. You kind of just make a tan white guy or tan Asian guy if you're a minority or person of color like myself who's black, or even Latino, and you want to make someone who looks like you in these anime style games. Which is also why I tend to play as female characters in anime style games, because again, these studios, they tend to give female characters all the options and male characters very little options. But aside from that mini rant, it's not a bad character creator. I've seen way worse. I've seen more basic. But this is important, that the game allows you to create your own character. By allowing this, there is a mental connection between you, the player, and that character, further immersing you in this world and not making you feel required to take part in the gacha system because you have your own character. Tower Fantasy is a gacha game. It does have that gacha gambling and gacha looting, but since you can make your own character, you don't feel forced into paying money on this game. You can play this game for free and not feel like you had to take part in the gacha of Tower Fantasy. I mentioned gacha like Genshin Impact. Tower Fantasy, like I said before, is a gacha game. Gacha games, for those who aren't familiar with the term, it's just gambling. Gacha games use RNG and loot boxes to induce players to spend real life money in the game for characters and weapons. In these kind of games, you can grind and get resources that allow you to obtain characters and weapons without spending money, but the developers really want you to spend that money. So the drop rates on characters are very, very low, and duplicate rates are very, very high. And mostly when you open up these packages, you're going to get like a lot of commons, a lot of rares, a lot of weapons instead of getting characters. So you're being forced to open these packs more and more and more. So you have to gamble if you really want to get the characters you want. This system I hate. I don't like video games being made into game simulators. It's bad for gaming, and is a strong reason for why I dislike Genshin Impact, because the gacha mechanics there are massive. However, the way Tower Fantasy works kind of removes the need to take part in the gacha gambling. Yes, it's present, but as I said, you don't have to take part in it. Why? Because as I mentioned before, you make your own character, so you don't really feel the need to have more characters. You want them because why not? But you don't feel like you have to have them because you already have a connection to your own character. Not only that, the way the other character works in this game is different. The characters are weapons. You created your created characters using weapons that can give you the look of the in-game characters that use the same weapons that you're using. So unlike Genshin, you aren't trying to collect waifus you want and still get good weapons on the side as well, because you do have to obtain weapons separately in Genshin. You're only trying to unlock weapons, and that's it. The cosmetic appearance of other characters is automatic attached to said weapons. With that, this game constantly throws free resources at you to be able to obtain weapons without even spending a dime. There's black necklaces, there's gold necklaces, and there's red necklaces. There's also some other in-game, mechanics as well when it comes to like those kind of currency systems. But those are the three main ones to get you characters, and the game is constantly throwing them at you. Like, you basically got to like tell the game, yo, I get it. You want to give me all these free things. That's cool, because it seems like you're just constantly getting, especially if you're a daily player, you're just constantly getting a lot of free resources to be able to get characters. And again, it makes it seem like they don't want you to spend money, but also you can kind of look at it in a reverse psychology way, where it's like, this game's being so nice, I might as well spend some money. Also, one of the cool things about this game is there's actually like I don't want to call it a challenge list, but if you complete these list of things, it's not a battle pass, but I don't know what really to call it, but let's just call it a challenge list. When you complete all the requirements for it, you get a free character of your choice. It doesn't matter what character it is, no matter how rare the character is, you can choose whichever secret whatever SSR, which is the gold legendary characters of the game, you want. And that's cool as hell. Genshin does not allow that. In my time playing Genshin, which was boring as hell, I was not ever allowed, like after only playing for 20 levels, to just choose what character in the game I want. At the time of recording, I have 6 SSR characters / weapons. SSR, like I said before, is gold rarity. Matter of fact, I have more SSRs than SRs, which is the purple rarity of the game. Before I mentioned that the game let me choose whichever character I want, I chose Tsubasa. Hopefully I pronounced that right. But she's an archer, just like I am in real life, so it was the easy choice for me. I don't regret it. I know she's not the most popular character in the game. Like, people like Meryl, they like Nemesis, and they like King. I chose her because, again, she's an archer. 2, she looks cool, and 3, she's not the character who everyone's gonna be playing as. Again, all of this without spending a dime. In comparison to Genshin, where I can't place my own created character, sure, the game gives you wishes here and there without having to spend money, and it's just you grinding your ass off enough to get all those wishes and the paragraphs to do a 10-pack opening. You can't just choose who you want. There isn't a time where the game allows you to pick one out of all the characters to have without the requirements of resources. If there is a character you want, you have to rely solely on RNG, or that week Paimon will have 2 characters that you could choose, but you have to rely on that, again, RNG, for that character to be in Paimon shop, which gets you and when it comes to like to all that, eventually you get to points where you're like, I might as well just put my freaking wallet and spend money, because I want a character. I want to play the game with this character. I want to beat the game story with this character, so I need to just get this character and not rely on RNG. So you spend money. The character in Genshin that I myself wanted was the Lucan Jean. More so Jean. I really like Jean's aesthetics and how she looked, and the voice they have an English actress as well. And she just seemed very cool. With 2 accounts with 30 hours played on both those accounts on Genshin, I've never gotten either Jean or Diluc. I don't care for the other characters, so I don't want to play the game because I don't have characters who I want to play as. I'm not going to keep grinding my ass off for the free resources to get more wishes because I want to play as just Jean and Diluc. This problem doesn't exist in Tower Fantasy because I was allowed to create my character. The incentive to play the game isn't gacha. The incentive to play the game is my character. There are characters in the game I'm drawn to. Sure, this character is intriguing. Nemesis is her new form. I want her character in Venus, and I got her. Like I named a character who I would want, and the game gave me her. The RNG in Tower Fantasy was on my side when I got Nemesis, who is the cover character of the game, the new form of a primary character in the game story. And she's cool as hell. Her weapon Venus is amazing and fun. She's one of the most common people who you'll see if you're doing war bosses and dungeons. So I did all of that talking about the weapons, gotcha, RNG. What about the story? We're talking about all these other things about Tower Fantasy and Genshin Impact, and what made me want to be more invested in Tower Fantasy over Genshin Impact. But we're not talking about the story. Story's important. Anyone who's familiar with me and watch my reviews, story's a big factor in why I will enjoy a video game. Well, Tower Fantasy story surprised me. When the game starts, much like other MMOs, with even Genshin, which isn't an MMO, the story felt dry. It started off and I was just not interested. It's like, all right, this voice acting sounds lame, it sounds boring. I switched to the native language voice acting, and that sounded still lame and boring. So I switched back to English. It was like I just wasn't invested in the characters. I had the feeling like that once again, we're going to be playing like a lot of MMOs. The story was going to be background noise that exists just to say the game has a story. But after the first few missions, it starts to pick up and get interesting. It becomes engaging. I ended up getting invested in the game story, more so in the first character we're introduced to, Shirley. But other characters also seem interesting. There's this doctor on the floating island who's a good character. There's the character Mia. The character Mia is really interesting. I like her, which is a big contrast in Paimon and Genshin, because Mia at the core is a copy of Paimon's character. But unlike Paimon, I don't find her annoying. Whenever I play Genshin, I hated Paimon. Every time I hear her voice, I want to skip through dialogue. I want to pump that thing to the Shadowsphere, because I just didn't like Paimon. Her voice was annoying. Her character was annoying. That doesn't happen with Mia. Not only is her character interest, but the voice is fine and often pleasant. Her hardware issues is kind of adorable. She's a machine, but often she stutters or messes up her words because of her hardware issue. It kind of reminds me of Ordis from Warframe, or the Bungie stolen version of Ordis, which is failsafe in Destiny 2. Not everything written in the story is great though. A lot of the voice acting in English, at least sounds unexpired. Like the director, whoever was the voice director or director of the game, didn't really direct the actors to act a certain way when it came to reading their lines. They just told the actors read what's there, and that's it. If anything, the director might have told the actors to speak in a low tone, because so many characters sound very low and like they're bored and like they're lacking emotion. Like a lot of characters talk just like this, where they're like, "This is sad. You can't see my face that I'm sad, but this is also happy. You can tell that I'm happy, but I'm happy." And a lot of characters talk like that. Male characters, female characters, all of them talk at this very low, uninterested, and bored tone. As for the game's atmosphere, it's solid for an MMO, but wouldn't be more than that compared to like an RPG or an action game. It doesn't have like action game RPG levels of atmosphere, but for MMO, it's pretty solid. The world building is nice. The world feels full. I definitely enjoy the open world of Tower Fantasy more than Genshin, and I know what I keep mentioning Genshin, so a lot of your famous probably will get mad at me. I don't care. I mean, I'm just being honest, and when it comes to Tower Fantasy, in all honesty, it's better than Genshin in my opinion. And again, it's my video, so obviously it's my opinion. You can disagree all you want, but the reason why I feel Tower Fantasy is a better game is it has a better world, it has better combat, it has better traversal system, actually having a character creation, better UI, better weapon design, and having good multiplayer. The last words to give us since Tower Fantasy is designed to be MMO, while Genshin isn't designed to be MMO. Genshin multiplayer component is terrible, but it's kind of just thrown in just to say it has multiplayer. Another thing I like about Tower Fantasy is, in comparison, is everything I need to click on is within the game. I don't need to go anywhere else other than the game to complete whatever the game has for me to click on. I don't need to go to my browser. I don't need to do anything else. For Genshin, on the other hand, I have to use my browser to do a daily check-in. You don't do the daily check-in for Genshin in the game. It's on the browser. That's inconvenient. I don't want to have to leave the game to go do other stuff for the game. I just want to play the game. I don't like being inconvenienced in video games. Let's circle back to talking about the game's combat. No matter what kind of game an RPG is, combat and gameplay is what matters the most. Gameplay is king. And at the center of that gameplay is combat. Tower Fantasy has really good combat system. It's very fast paced. It's very smooth, especially for a game that isn't just a PC game, but also a mobile game. Sometimes you have these PC/mobile games, they're not optimized very well for one or the other. Usually, since mobile games make the most money, they're not optimized for PC. This game doesn't have that issue. For me personally, Tower Fantasy has ran perfectly, other than one time when it froze for me on stream recently. But outside of that, it's been running perfectly. It might have the most responsive combat on mobile when it comes to any kind of mobile RPG game or MMO style game on mobile right now. It's a very good mobile game and a very good PC game. The way it all coexists with the game's slow time mechanics, where if you do a perfect dodge, time slows down, and the two weapons that you aren't currently using get fully charged for like ultimates. So you can tie off combos and slow enemies down. It's very unique and cool, and I like it. And again, this, even though I call it unique, it does compare more so to Honkai Impact's combat than say Genshin's combat. Everything with the combat feels right and good. That's the big thing I want to mention here. It just feels right and it feels good. It feels like it's a perfect mix with the way the game's story progress and the game world building is done. But there is one thing the combat is lacking. It's lacking elements of combos, which isn't something that only Genshin does, but many games include Mass Effect 3, Mass Effect Andromeda, and plenty of others out there have the active use and two abilities of different elemental origins. If you play Mass Effect, the case would be bio and tech abilities. But generally, creating a violent elemental combo is what will happen, like combining water abilities with electric abilities or fire abilities with wind abilities, getting a fire tornado. And what I've noticed in this game, combat, those don't exist. There is no elemental combos that I've noticed playing the game, which is disappointing, especially since the game does do so well with everything else for the combat. Why isn't there elemental combinations when it comes to the weapons? Circling back to the game's UI, it's very simple. Doesn't take up much of the screen, allows me to really see the world. The weapon abilities are small in the corner, so it's not taking up much on the screen space as well. I've yet to be in a moment in the game where I felt like anything was blocking my visual path or visual enjoyment of the game and its world. If I were to nitpick, I'd say, sometimes a message popping up in the middle of your screen during missions can be annoying, but it's nitpicky and it's just there. You can just click off of it. But again, it does happen here and there. It's rare, but it happens. And usually doesn't happen when playing the game, so it's not a big deal. Like I said, it's usually like right after a mission ends, before a mission begins, you get this message on your screen that explains more details of what the mission is. There's a lot more to Tower Fantasy than what's at face value. If you see it and you think Genshin clone, but when you're playing it, there's so much more there, more substance, more game in the game, to where you realize it is its own entity. It is its own game. It takes the idea that Genshin had and evolves it, which if you're someone who's as old as I am and playing games as long as I have, that's a common thing. Not even just video games, movies as well, TV shows as well. Directors, writers, showrunners, they'll see what people like and they'll copy that and then try to evolve into their own idea and go from there. And there's more to what I just mentioned before that adds to the game. For example, this game has a relic system. Relics are pretty cool. Some are just weapons or shields. Others add to the game's traversal system. It's all unique and different. You can attach armor in a game to give you buffs and protection. So the game has armors, not just, hey, you play as this character, they exist. No, you can put armor on your character as well. The cooking gets very basic, but it's not bad. Side quests are straightforward and simple. The last thing I do want to talk about, because this is a long review and I do want to wrap it out, so we're kind of like speeding through some stuff, but the last thing I want to talk about before wrapping up this video is the multiplayer. This is indeed MMO, so you can't review an MMO without talking about one of the most important things in the game is abbreviation, the multiplayer. There's two M's in there, massive multiplayer. So as a solo player, rather it's an MMO or FPS game by choice, I have friends who play these games, but I like to play alone sometimes. Tower Fantasy gets me taking part in MMO aspects that I tend to ignore. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I'm one of those people who play MMOs who tend to just do all the solo content and ignore the multiplayer content. Tower Fantasy is one of the few MMOs who actually gets me doing the multiplayer aspects of the game, which also Final Fantasy 14 is pretty good at, because Final Fantasy 14 kind of forced you to, since a lot of the dungeons in that game are tied to the main story quest lines. The dungeons in this game aren't tied to the quest line for Tower Fantasy, but it's so easy to get involved with the community to where you can't help but want to get involved with the community. I've joined in on doing world bosses, which are really fun, especially if you see so many players gather around one enemy. I've done joint operations, which are kind of like group dungeons. The dungeons themselves called ruins. I've done those with other players. I've done some of them solo as well. So I'm always getting involved with more than just playing by myself. But during all of these multiplayer moments, and in general with the game, I've never felt lag. I've come across no connection issues or issues related to playing, most MMOs, especially when it just released. My only tech issues has been with the game's cutscenes, where characters will repeat dialogue or not vocally hear dialogue at all in a sentence, but in the sentence after that, there'll be voice dialogue. So it's just a little weird thing. And it happens a lot with a lot of MMOs that come from overseas. I'm American, so when I say overseas, I'm just referring to anywhere that's not in America. There's a lot of options in the game's multiplayer, including optional PvP. You're not forced to do it, but it's there if you want to, and it's balanced. Everyone who takes part in PvP have all their abilities and skills maxed out. So even though this is a gacha game and you can spend money to get all these characters and weapons, when you play PvP, everyone is on an even playing field. So it's not pay to win PvP, but it's pay to win if you're if you view pay to win as being PvE, and you have all the maxed out shit, so you're doing 4 million damage in dungeons and raids and whatnot. Overall, I think Tower Fantasy is a solid video game. I've been enjoying myself and haven't really come across many issues. The thing that holds the game back are common to MMO games like lackluster voice acting, fetch quests, reuse mobs. But the thing the game does well that I've mentioned in this video is what keeps me coming back every day. Someone who doesn't really play anime aesthetic video games, someone who doesn't really care about gacha and thinks gacha is a shitty system that hurts gaming. Yet I play this game daily. I streamed it for 5 hours last Thursday, and since last Thursday, it's been my common stream game this week. I've mentally invested it in this game that captured me when its counterpart couldn't. And I haven't spent the dime yet, and yet I feel like I have so many characters and so many weapons that I'm not missing out on anything just because I haven't spent any money. I look forward to what additions get added to Tower Fantasy. Hopefully it succeeds enough to where Hoda Studios adds a lot of new content, expanded stories, and more regions to explore, and more characters, things like that. Tower Fantasy is a solid game, and again, it surprises me to say that because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, here we go, another gacha game that's gonna be trash, not have any substance, but it does. It's a solid game. With all of that said, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Do all the things the algorithm likes. Follow me on Twitch. Link in the description box below. I've been a newest gamer archer. Y'all stay safe. Become to another. I'm out of here. Deuces.